To start things off, I'm a 19-year-old female and currently work at my local grocery store as a stock clerk. For those of you who don't know what a stock clerk is, it's basically someone who moves products from a warehouse to the shelves of the store. If we get new merchandise, our job is to check that whatever it is isn't damaged or mislabeled. It seems simple enough, but it could become annoying having to do it constantly. Anyway, I mainly worked during the night as I had classes during the day, so the night shift was the only time I was available. I'd like to mention that the grocery store was located in a part of my city that wasn't in the best area. What I mean by that is that you'd occasionally get your fair share of creeps wandering through the store. Drug dealers, junkies, rednecks, confused old men, crackheads, and even people who seemed psychotic. I tried my best to stay away from those people, even though they were mostly harmless. One night, I was finishing up putting some canned goods on the shelves when, out of nowhere, I smelled what seemed to be vomit. I looked behind me to see a very big man standing there. He had long, greasy, unkempt hair and looked like he hadn't been to the gym in years. I gave him a friendly smile to try and be polite, and then he asked where the juices were. I pointed to aisle 6, and he then started to ask me questions. How old I was, if I went to school, and if I had a boyfriend. Obviously, I told him I had a boyfriend and tried giving him the hint to back off, but it didn't seem like he got the message. He then leaned in closer to me and said something that still gives me chills. "I like your pretty hair, Casey." He said my name. I have no idea how he got it, and we weren't required to wear a name tag, so it didn't make sense at all. After I was done stocking the items, he then asked me what time I got off work, and I just turned around and simply ignored him. After about 20 minutes, I didn't see the man, so I figured he left, so I go to the front and clock out and walk toward my car with my coworker. As I got in my car, I noticed another car, a Honda Civic, parked on the far side of the parking lot with its headlights turned off. The dimly lit street light was just enough to reveal the same man sitting in his car staring at me. I sped out of there with him following me behind, but I just made a few random turns onto streets in hopes of losing him, which I thankfully did. That night, while in bed, I woke up to the sound of an old engine outside my house. And sure enough, I saw that same white Honda Civic from earlier. After I noticed it, it sped off down the street, and I never saw it or him again.
So this happened almost a year ago now, when I still lived in my apartment complex. It was in a nice area, but it seemed to attract the weirdest people. Basically, I live at home with my mom and younger sister to attend college. Obligatory backstory. There was a neighbor in the building across from mine, an older single woman named Susan. When me and my sister first moved in, we'd hang out near her building with a former friend, who's worthy of her own story to be honest, and so we developed a bit of a rapport with Susan. We'd bring her tea when she was sick and walk her dog for her. I was next door neighbors with a different woman called Laura. Laura is a mother of 2 young kids, and she and her boyfriend like to sit on their balcony overlooking the parking lot and smoke deep into the late hours of the night. Well, one day Laura was doing this at around 2 a.m. Laura texts my mom that there's been an incident. My mom tells me and my sister, we both tend to stay up pretty late, and we went to her balcony to see what was up. In the parking lot, we see a car that's halfway backed into another parked car, but almost at a side angle. Laura says the person who was in the car ran away as soon as they hit the other. The car, however, still remained. Still running, too. So we're all wondering what the hell this is all about. My mom goes downstairs to the car to check for damage when she sees a figure standing at Susan's building. It was a man we'd never seen before, and he was just standing there. Turns out the owner of the sideways car freaked out because he saw us looking, and claims literally, someone stole it and moved it out of the way so they could have my parking spot. The next morning, my mom texts Susan about the incident, as the sideways car was kind of blocking hers in. She says she knows what happened and has us come outside so she could tell us. She's standing with the man from the parking lot the night before. He introduces himself as Eric and says that he's seeing Susan. When we start talking, turns out he didn't actually know what had happened. He only saw someone running from the car, but that story's irrelevant now. Anyway, we get to talking, and apparently Susan had told him about our family and that I'm studying to be a therapist. I confirm it, and he just lights up. He goes on and on about the similar work he's done and thanks me for my service. He starts giving me names of places I can go to for shadowing hours and resources for getting a job. Finally, he tells me to use his name for applying for jobs in the future. He'd get me a job at the psych center he apparently helped to found. I looked it up and could not corroborate. He was very insistent that I use his name. Next, he talks to my sister. Susan had told him she liked movies, so he told her he had a small speaking role in one of those teen book-to-film adaptations we used to obsess over. Of course, when we got home, we looked up his name, that he gave me, along with the movie title. Nowhere was he pictured in the film he gave us, or given any sort of credit for it, so we dropped the movie title and just looked up his name by itself. It wasn't a movie that we found. Apparently, he had been infamous in our town for years, someone known as a child biter. He had earned the name by biting an 8-year-old girl who was playing with his daughter. A few years later, he bites another girl, and apparently even stalked her family in a public parking lot after. Another few years pass and he had a third victim. We're freaking out and texting Laura, who's kind of become our gossip buddy. She has 2 young kids, so she's furious that this guy with actual criminal records was allowed to move in, though he wasn't put on the lease. We were concerned too, because there are a lot of kids that live in ours and Susan's building. The question came up of whether or not to tell Susan. We debated, but decided it was the best thing. My mom sends Susan a long text about how we discovered what we did. 5 minutes later, she calls us. She tells us not to believe the news articles and court records, and the fact that he pled guilty was because he was politically framed by one of the girl's fathers. He was running for some small office or something. My mom covers for me and my sister by saying we looked up his name and the movie in front of Laura. Susan demands to know why Laura's concerned. My mom tells her to talk to Laura herself, so she does. She knocks on Laura's door and asks what her concerns are. She barely even has time to get one sentence out about how there are kids literally everywhere, and she's trying to be a good parent, before Susan turns around and just leaves, just like that. There are a few families whose kids I babysit, who pretty much let their kids wander around the complex all day with no supervision. We tell some of them, and they're enraged. For 2 days, there's not a single kid outside. A few days later, an 8-year-old girl we babysit, Maddie. This poor kid has the worst history with getting the attention of creepy men. I think they pick up on our shitty home life. And her friend ran up to us. They told us about a nice guy at the pool who was giving out M&Ms. A few minutes later, Eric strolls up in his bathing suit, and Maddie tells us it was him. We avoid eye contact, but he slows down when he passes us. We warn Maddie and her friend in 8-year-old terms to stay away from him. Another time, we're visiting a friend who lives in his building. He emerges right as we enter the hallway. He puts on this huge grin and starts making small talk. We awkwardly excuse ourselves and go to the friend's house. We go inside, but our friend keeps peeking out the window. Outside, we see Eric, standing by his car and just staring in through my friend's window. Part of our babysitting includes picking Maddie up from the bus randomly in the week when asked. The bus stop is right next to the pool. And who do we see in a lounge chair with sunglasses, not doing a thing and watching every single day at bus time? Eric. We were all kind of pissed off at this dude. We contacted the property manager, who said she couldn't do anything because he hadn't registered as living there. If he stays longer than 2 weeks, though, he'll be charged for not being on it. Well, the 2 weeks ended, and he disappeared. We never saw him again. I'm still stumped as to why the hell he told me to use his real name as a reference, when a simple search of his name shows all of his history. Again, I lived in a nice area in a small suburban town. No idea what it was about these apartments that just attracted the weirdos and criminals. Maybe it's some sort of unspoken agreement for them to all gather there that we didn't know about. Maybe in a few days I'll post the story of our friend. She claims she was a witch and tried to murder her parents. But until then, creepy man who likes to bite children, let's not meet again.
My apologies in advance for the story being so short, as I only remember this briefly, but I'll say what I do remember. When I was 15, I used to have a boy living across the street from me who would always seem off to me and even the rest of my girls in my neighborhood. His name was Oscar, and he was very weird. Whenever I'd get off the bus from school, Oscar would be waiting for me at my bus stop and then follow me home while keeping a short distance. Once in a while, he'd even look through my window when I was home alone. The most I ever did was smile or say hi to him to be friendly, but I tried staying away from him at all costs, but this guy would never get the hint. However, this didn't happen only when he saw me. He would take it a step further and stalk me on all my social medias. Facebook, Instagram, and even my YouTube account that I hardly used. If my parents weren't home, I'd constantly ignore him when he tried to come by my house. But when they were home, they'd encourage me to hang out with him, thinking that maybe he was just being friendly. Thankfully, Oscar moved out of his house with his parents and moved to another city, which was relieving. About a month later, my parents told me something about Oscar that I didn't know. Apparently, he had been stalking a girl much younger than I was and wouldn't leave her alone. One day, while her parents weren't home, he unlocked the door to her house with a key and went upstairs to find her in the shower, where he then tried to rape her. Luckily, police had been called by a neighbor, and he was arrested and charged with breaking and entering and assaulting, and was then thrown in jail for 5 years.
Back in December of 2004, it doesn't seem real. It's almost been 10 years. I was living in Portland, Oregon, and attending college. I was sitting at home one night, writing my last research paper for the term. I had my Yahoo IM up, chatting to a few friends, when a message from someone not on my list pops up. Have you ever thought about suicide? Okay. Weird. But hey, it's almost midnight on a Sunday night, and stranger things have been asked me before. Can I see your tits? Etc. So I messaged the stranger back just for kicks. Sure, who hasn't at some point? Why do you ask? Well, asking that question opened up Pandora's box. He battered me with questions about how I wanted to die. Why did I want to die? Would I want to die with others? Obviously getting creepier and creepier as the conversation continues. But I play along, assuming the guy is just screwing around with me. I ask him his name. He says it's Jerry, and I ask to see a picture. He sends me a profile pic on Hot or Not, and asks me if I think he's good looking. I tell him sure. Yeah, you're cute. Whatever. He asks to see a picture of me. I send him a random old photo of a girl on my MySpace friends list. Yes, it's that old, I realize now. And he tells me he thinks I'm a 10. Awesome. Thanks, Jerry, who is obsessed with suicide. As the conversation continues on, he tells me he's sick of life, and women don't seem to be attracted to him, so he just wants to end it all. I tell him the things you're supposed to say to people in this situation. Relationships are nothing. You're more important to the people in your life. Don't do it. Blah blah blah. I'm not a heartless person, but I just didn't feel like talking someone off the ledge at what was now about 1 a.m. Jerry tells me he's met a lot of women online that want to kill themselves, and he's planning a party for Valentine's Day, so everyone can come and do it together at his house. He asks me if I'm interested in joining. I say yeah, sure, but make an excuse that I don't have a car to get down there for it. He tells me there are a few women from Portland coming down for it, and one of them has a van. He's sure I can catch a ride. He says he's built a beam in his home that will hold up to 50 bodies at once, but I shouldn't wear shoes because they'll weigh me down. By now, yes, I'm starting to realize that this guy was in fact very serious, and this was not a joke. So I started asking him specifics. What his address is, what his full name is, who are the women traveling from Portland. He tells me their names, and that one of them is bringing her 5 children with her, that they want to die as well. Huge red flags are up at this point, so while I'm chatting with him, I call a friend of mine back home in Eastern Oregon who works as a 911 dispatcher. She's actually at work when I call her, and after telling her the whole story, she advises me to hang up and call the Portland Police Department right away, at least give them the info to pass to Klamath Falls. She makes a record in their system that I've called just in case. I keep talking to Jerry and call the Portland police. They send 2 officers out about an hour later, and they pretty much laugh at me when I explain to them what's going on. I print out our chat log, give them the guy's full name and address I've already verified through Google as being legit, as far as Google can at least, and they tell me to just quit talking to him. Simple as that, and go about their business. Don't I feel stupid now? I call my friend back home, and I tell her what the Portland PD did. She said to keep an eye on things. If he keeps talking, just keep saving the conversation. So I do. For another 2 hours, and things just get to the point where I can't handle him anymore. He's battering me with questions about how do I want to die, wearing clothes or naked? Do I want to have sex before I die? Would I have a problem killing kids before? Would I want to hold hands with others while we hang? Finally, I just told him I'd be in touch closer to Valentine's Day. For the most part, I laughed it off with some friends, because Portland PD never got back to me about anything. Of course, I assumed it ended up being a very strange prank. Fast forward. February 10th, 2005, a friend of mine calls me while I'm on campus on my way to work. He tells me some guy in Klamath Falls has been arrested for trying to set up a mass suicide pact for Valentine's Day. I'm floored. I run to my office, log into a computer, and sure enough, it's everywhere on all news forums. Gerald Crane, arrested for plotting mass suicide Valentine's Day party. My friend from back home sees the news and calls me. Tells me I need to call back to the Portland PD and tell them I called this in back in December. I make the call, and an hour later, 2 FBI agents are coming to pick me up at my job, taking me home and taking my entire computer to be analyzed. We sit in my living room, and I'm questioned over and over about my involvement and if I was really planning to commit suicide. I keep telling them over and over that I just talked to the guy as a joke. I thought it was some sort of sick prank, and that I only called the cops when he started talking about some woman from Portland bringing her kids, too. I'd given all the info to the Portland PD officers back in December. How was I supposed to know they never did anything with it? Which they didn't. They sat on it, probably shredded it, and never even sent any of the info to Klamath Falls. The agents tell me the story has gotten a lot bigger, and that Crane had contacted hundreds of people. At least 30 had agreed to come on Valentine's Day to his house and all commit suicide together. One woman, her parents found some emails between she and Crane and called the police, and that's how they finally got involved. Not from me nearly 2 months ago. This happened less than a week before Valentine's Day. I'm freaked out. They drop me back off at college, and I tell my boss everything that's happened. She tells me that reporters have been calling non-stop since I left wanting to talk to me. She said they didn't give them my cell phone number, but that she thought it was only a matter of time before they showed up at the office. I was a student worker. My name is on the campus website and directory. If the AP got a hold of a police report, there was no saying how fast they could start tracking me down. I called my mom and told her what's happened. She tells me she'll be up that evening to come get me and bring me home for a week. I take 4 days off, turn in what assignments I have left. The FBI has the rest on my tower, and I head off to Eastern Oregon to wait out the media. Big mistake. Huge. Because by the time I made it back home that night, they'd already tracked down my brother, and my sister-in-law thought it was so cool that ABC and CNN wanted to talk to me that she gave them my parents' address and my cell phone number. Yeah, she's an idiot. I was harassed, chased down, and semi-terrorized until I finally gave an interview to Good Morning America. I hoped it would die down then. The story was out. Who cares? Wrong. Apparently every freaking outlet cares until you give them the 15 seconds of conversation the others didn't get. I had my 15 seconds of fame, and I never want to deal with that shit again. Crane is still sitting in the Salem State Hospital for his crimes of solicitation to commit murder. Mr. Have you ever thought of suicide? Let's not meet in real life.